Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Supercharge Conceptual Design using the AEC Collection. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software, the premier software systems integrator in North America, and we're delighted to have FenestraPro here as well. My name is Amy Worthy, and I'm excited to be your moderator today. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with us by taking advantage of this fully customized console. By clicking on the colorful icons at the bottom of your screen, you can minimize, maximize, and resize each of these widgets throughout the presentation. Starting from left to right, you have the Help widget. Please use this if you need assistance during the webinar. Then you have the Slides widget, which contains the PowerPoint for today's presentation. The Media Player allows you to control the volume and pause the live webinar if you need to step away from your desk momentarily. This is also where you will see the screen share for today's live demo. After that, you have the Q&A widget, so you can interact with us by typing in questions and comments. Please take a moment to introduce yourself in the questions widget. We want to know who you are, where you're located, and anything interesting you'd like to share with us. Also, use this box to type in questions you have throughout the presentation. We'll take time to answer those at the end. Next, you'll find the speaker bio, where you can learn more about today's presenter. After that, you'll see the Facebook widget, so you can catch up on the latest updates and like our page if you haven't already. And after that is the survey widget, and we hope you'll fill out the survey to be entered into a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you online on our YouTube channel. We'll also send you an email following the webinar with a link to the recording. If you haven't already, search Applied Software on social media and connect with us to receive the latest special offers. Be sure to visit our website, asti.com, for more information on services and support, products, training opportunities like CAD learning, live lab learning, and more. For those questions that just can't wait, you can chat with an available representative on our website. You'll find the chat box on the bottom right side of any page of our website, and if no one's available to answer your request, we'll receive it via email and get back to you as soon as possible. You'll also find a complete schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and trainings on our website calendar. Please take note of our upcoming webinars. We have BIM, Adoption, Collaboration, and Best Practices next Thursday, April 19th from 12:30 to 1:30 Eastern Time. And the following week, we have CAD Learning, Getting Started with the Basics on Wednesday, April 25th. So if you haven't heard of CAD Learning, please join us for that so you can learn more about the tools available to you through Applied Software. Upcoming events, we have an Autodesk Insight360 microburst training. That is next Monday, April 16th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. This is an online training, and it's $50 per person. You can find more information on our website calendar. At the conclusion of the webinar, a survey will pop up. Complete the survey to be entered into a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You must complete the survey to be entered into the drawing. Now you can save on live lab learning courses by attending our webinars. Sign up for a live lab learning course within 30 days of this webinar to save 25% on the price of the course. You must sign up within 30 days, but that does not mean you have to complete the course within 30 days. You'll receive a coupon in our follow-up email tomorrow morning with some more information and a link to our live lab learning page where you can learn more and see upcoming classes. And now I would like to turn it over to today's presenters. We have Simon Whalen and Mike Flood here on the call with us. Simon?
Hi Amy, how you doing? Thank you very much for that, and thanks to everybody who's joining us this afternoon if you're in the United States, or this evening if you're here with me and Mike in Dublin, Ireland, where we're based. We are with FenestraPro. We're a third-party developer developing tools within Revit and other Autodesk products, and we're, Applied Software are partners of ours in the United States. So today we just want to talk about FenestraPro a little bit and how we fit into the AEC collection, Autodesk AEC Collection, to very much look at the building envelope and, the facade design and how we can augment some of the great functionality that's provided in FormIt and Insight360 and obviously in Revit. So we're going to work through, an outline workflow. I'll give you a little bit more detail around that in a second, but, just to introduce ourselves, as Amy said, Simon is my name. I'm one of the founders of FenestraPro. I'm an architect, as is a lot of our company here at FenestraPro. A lot of us come from an architectural background. I'm joined by Mike, one of my colleagues. Mike's our BIM Applications Manager. Say hello, Mike.
Hi.
So between the two of us, we'll be sort of bouncing back and forth, as part of this workflow between FormIt, Revit, and Insight. And just to give you an idea of what we hope to do, I'll just run through one or two contextual slides, really. First of all, just giving you an outline on FenestraPro Premium, what it is, the AEC Collection, and and where and how we fit into it. And then we'll jump into a more a workflow-based webinar where we'll look at a format mass and some of the things you can do, manipulating those masses in a very much a form-finding exercise at early stage, importing it into Revit, looking at some of the Revit energy settings, and then engaging or leveraging FenestraPro Premium to start making some really early stage decisions, and outline considerations around your facade, and where FenestraPro can very much give the designer an understanding of the implications of their design decisions. We'll then jump into Insight360 and just look at some of the functionality there, and how it looks at the more, the whole building energy, as opposed to that granularity that FenestraPro offers around the facade. We'll go back to Revit and start applying detailed elements to that mass model, where we'll engage or leverage FenestraPro again and start looking, as I said, in a little bit more detail or a bit more granularity at the facade and at your glass selection, your solid panels, or whatever that might be. We can then maybe just touch on Insight360 again, and then come back on any questions. I'm sure maybe Amy didn't say, but I'm sure if you drop questions into the chat box, we can circle back towards the end, or if you do have anything towards the end, we can touch on it there. I suppose just a really quick outline to FenestraPro itself. Ourselves, as I said, we're developing applications within Revit. We come from an architectural background. We very much believe that there's a better way to design buildings. Sustainability and energy performance, and best practices with regards to building performance, we feel should be inherent in the building design. And the more and more time goes by, and regulations and codes get more and more strict, we feel that this is becoming a reality really for everyone, and that sustainability isn't an afterthought. It's something that really is embedded in the process. And that's where we're coming from, that belief that it should be easier for us. There's a lot of complex analysis tools out there that, general designers, I suppose, don't engage with early enough because they're too complex. So we tend to push them out. This causes problems. Decisions don't get made early enough. And then when it's much later in the process, we're trying to, circle back and re-engineer or reiterate, rework some of our decisions, which is frustrating. It's time consuming, and it often doesn't work. So that's the pretty much where we have come from the building envelope point of view. Obviously, within Autodesk's AEC Collection, we have a bunch of products that Applied Software or your software resellers will provide, and that might be some of the basics that a lot of us have grown up with, as it were. The AutoCADs of this world, some of the more infrastructural tools, Navis and InfraWorks are applied there. And then some of them, real nice to have, 3D Studio Max, Dynamo Studio, which is getting really popular. And then some other bits and pieces that, might be a little bit more specialist, structural breach design, robot, things like that, So there is a bunch of products out there, of which this isn't an exhaustive list, but by any means, but obviously Applied Software can give you further detail. But as architects, and as early stage designers, I suppose some of the really, useful ones that we'll be focusing on here today would be things like FormIt, Revit, obviously, and Insight. And, we're looking at that today as to, how can we very much leverage that workflow in or those three applications to really tie them together and to use FenestraPro to really fill the gaps or, supercharge it as it were. FenestraPro is a facade design tool, as I mentioned. It allows designers to design more energy efficient buildings and building facades that can comply with the kind of codes we want to comply with or regulations we want to comply with, meet the building performances that we want to design to without affecting or compromising the aesthetic of the building. We're designers ourselves, and it was hugely important to us to allow the architect to maintain control over the aesthetic design from an early point in the design process, as opposed to other stakeholders, other design team members having directing or imposing on the design from at a late stage in the process. I'm talking about cost consultants, mechanical engineers, even energy specialists, and dictating change at a late stage. So we're trying to iron that problem out and allow the designer an early stage understanding over the implications of what he or she is designing. Because it's dynamic within Revit, we can very much see the implications of this as we're developing the model. So as we're, bring a form from FormIt into Revit, or as we're applying elements to that form, or whatever that may be. This leads to a couple of benefits. There's a significant improvement in the time and therefore the cost to the designer or to the firm, the ability to maintain aesthetic control, as I mentioned, and very much give the designer an understanding of what they're designing, and is it going to change, or is are we just designing to rules of thumb, or have we got really good methodologies around our early decision making process. The ability to review compliance from an early stage, particularly around the thermal performance of the envelope or of the skin, and all of these things allow us to design better performing buildings, or as I touched on, design good, high performance buildings better, and that's really what we believe and what we're trying to get to. So FenestraPro, there's a couple of key features. I won't go through them all in great detail, but we might look at our different stages of the design from CD through SD and DD. We can establish glass to wall ratios, or look at the impact of 80% glass to the south. What does that look like from an energy performance point of view? We might implement some early stage shading devices and see how shading design is going to affect our performance. Through later stages, we can very much start getting into the automatic generation of glazing penetrations, whether that be windows or current wall systems, and populate that directly to our model based on the performances that we're trying to achieve. Check compliance throughout, comparatively analyze between different options or different stages of our building or our model development, and material selections and the impacts of those on the energy performance of the building. You might ask how we're different from Insight360, and I touched on a couple of things there. We are Autodesk Development Network members. We work very closely with a lot of teams within Autodesk, including the Insight360 and the building performance analysis groups in Boston. And we feel FenestraPro is very complementary to Insight. It gives a lot of granularity and data on the facade, in more detail than Insight, which is a more whole building energy analysis tool. We generate facade solutions directly to the Revit model within Revit, as opposed to, you're stepping out of Revit to go to Insight. And we're part of the Revit workflow. So, I hope we will demonstrate that today as to how we fit in and how we complement some of these tools, So what I might do is I will hand over to Mike, who's here beside me, and Mike might start taking you through some of the this workflow. First of all, with FormIt, and then into Revit. So I'm going to share my screen first of all, and hopefully you can see it, and it might come up there.
So yeah, okay. So we're just going to finish a FormIt model which is started. It's going to be a glass tower building, and it's important to set your location in FormIt. It'll bring in a map of where the site is. So this is in New York, this building. So I'm just going to finish this. I'm just going to drag this out. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to drag out this part. And just hit the tab button, and it'll allow you to put in a dimension. Then same for the top. Just going to drag up the top 25 feet. Okay, so that's our building. Another thing we can do is just double click on the building and use the levels that we have set up, so they'll show on the surfaces of the building. It's a good idea to put the origin of the building on the crosshairs, like where the axis is, because when you bring that into Revit, you can use the project base point in Revit to coordinate with this origin point, and you can get the FormIt model to come in exactly where you want it. So we've placed the FormIt model right on the axis there. So I've added the levels to the surface. Now I can look at some solar analysis in Revit, in FormIt as well. I need to double click on the building and just go analyze. And if you hover over the surfaces, it'll give you some values, some solar values there for monthly peaks. You can also go to cumulative, yearly cumulative values. So it's kind of limited, but it gives you some idea of some solar analysis in FormIt. Then I'll save this. I'll save it locally. Hopefully it'll go into the right folder. Then I'll go into Revit, and we have an urban block set up in Revit. And then I can bring in that model. I can go to the import, and I have to have the FormIt add-on in Revit to do this. So you go, yeah, it's there, okay. I can import that, and hopefully it'll come in at the right location. Yeah, there it is. Let's just go to a plan view. And there you see the project base point in Revit has coordinated with the origin of the FormIt model. So it comes in exactly where you want it. So the next thing we can do is you have to add mass floors to this. It's already done, okay. And then I can go and just check in the energy settings. I don't need to save it. Just check in the energy settings. If you don't really need perimeter zone division, you can check that off. Just check. I don't want to put glazing percentage right now, so that's all okay. Just check those settings are okay. I'm going to just create the energy model. Okay, continue working. And then what we can do is open FenestraPro. And from there, we're going to add glazing, and there's a lot we can do in FenestraPro. I'm going to click on the mass, because this is the conceptual mass model. And in this project, we have the urban block as a mass, and the imported FormIt model as a mass. So that's why it asks you to select which mass you want. So I can calculate the solar loads here, and then probably I'll hand over to Simon, and he can show you some.
Yeah, so basically, as Mike touched on there, the first thing that opens up when you open a new project in FenestraPro is this, solar data calculator, which will, pretty much back up what we have seen already in FormIt. So, it will accrue the solar radiation on different orientations for any location globally, So that's the first thing that will happen. Once that's done once, it's cached. You don't need to do it again unless you move the project or reorientate it or change it in any great detail. So FenestraPro, I think in its simplest sense, is a dashboard where we're looking at glass to wall ratio, of which we have none yet. We haven't applied any glazing. We're looking at thermal performance, U value or R value, internal heat gains. Obviously, we looked at some solar radiation per orientation in FormIt, but what we're starting to get in FenestraPro is internal heat gains based on the quantity of glazing and the type of glass that we have. Likewise, daylighting. So the more glazing, obviously, the greater those values are going to be. As we drop things out, we'll have, our inputs, fields of FenestraPro, Performance Manager, where we can drive the glass to wall ratio, and Facade Manager, where we could manage that each facade and each surface. And then we can expand it a little bit more, showing glazing, solar load, daylighting, etc. So obviously, look, this is quite a lot of real estate, and if you're a one-screen user, there's a lot going on there. So what we can also do is pop out those charts, minimize them to the dashboard, and you'll see these charts start to populate as we work through things. So the first thing we might want to do is optimize our glass to wall ratio. We have a code or standard builder, I suppose. So users can create their own codes, whether you're, locally in New York City or Atlanta, Georgia, or you want to use ASHRAE 90.1 on a particular, type of building in a particular zone. You can create and implement the elemental or the prescriptive performance of your different elements. FenestraPro effectively looks at the form factor of the building. So in other words, the ratio between the volume of this building and the surface area. So first of all, it'll look at, the building performance of the entire skin, so roof, floor, walls, and glass. As we start setting thermal performance for our roof and our ground floor, it will effectively take that away from our, building performance to give us just our facade performance. So in other words, poorly performing glazing, our facade has to improve. Our poorly performing roof and floor, our facade has to improve accordingly. High performance roof and floor, our facade can loosen up somewhat. And that's the kind of, I suppose the balanced approach that FenestraPro will take. If we start then setting thermal performances for our glass and our walls, you'll see my glass to wall ratio change. So again, high performance glazing, we can figure out how to use more glass. Poorly performing glass, our glass to wall ratio is limited. So we can very much play around with these values to optimize our solution, our glass to wall ratio. But then as we start creating codes, and we have a couple of just really simple built-in ones here, we can see what is compliant or non-compliant with that particular code. So, you see in red is non-compliant. As I drag and improve, it is shown as compliant, or I could hit set and everything jumps to that particular value to achieve that particular code. Let's say, for argument's sake, I want to really max out this. I really max out the amount of glazing, so I'm not going to worry too much about code. I'm going to say 77% glazing for argument's sake. So I can apply that to the building. Whoops, I didn't apply it there. Sorry. Let's say 88% glazing. Okay, so that's just applied a lot of glass to that building, and then we can start getting values from it. So glass, we've applied 88%. We're starting to get thermal performances of our skin. We're trying to, we're starting to get U values, etc. We can reduce it. Look at 77, 78, as I kind of touched on earlier. Somewhat. So what we're looking at here is the heat gains within the perimeter zone of every orientation. And we can drill down somewhat into different stories or different different surfaces as you get a little bit more granular. But for the purposes of this workflow, let's just keep it really simple, really high level. So solar loads, daylight performances for every orientation and every facade, Then we can, drill in somewhat and, start identifying individual facades and selecting them, and we start seeing our dashboards and our charting update, or we could select everything, and everything drops in there, and we can start making some further decisions around that. So in other words, let's say we want to change the glass type, for example, on these particular facades. So we've got some generic glazing types. We'll choose this one, quite randomly, which is a much higher performing glass, and you'll see our heat gains reduce significantly. We can apply some really simple shading devices. As we can see there, we start applying a horizontal canopy, and and that starts, applying straight to the model, and that will have an effect. We can apply some frit. Where's my frit gone? A really simple, notional manner, 50% transparency over, let's say, 33% of the glazed opening. And again, my values reduce or increase or accordingly, So there's loads of things that we can do in a really simple, very intuitive manner from that early stage engagement between FormIt into Revit, At this stage now, let's say we're kind of happy. We've got, some, heat gains. Let's deselect everything. And look at the overall building. We're looking at heat gains of about 18, between 18 and 20, depending on what I select there, BTUs per square foot hours. So at this stage now, we could maybe export this to Insight to start getting a little bit further analysis on my EUI or a dollar figure. So very simply, we're just going to generate an Insight. We're not going to do that because that, there's an export, and you wait for an email, but Mike has one set up already.
Okay. So yeah, it might take a little while to get the Insight, and it'll send you an email. So here's one we did earlier. So it gives you the energy use intensity over here, and it gives you the cost. If you click on that, it'll give you the cost. So it gives you kind of visualization of the model here. So you can orbit it and do different things. Down here, it'll show you the ASHRAE targets standard for cost, ASHRAE 90.1. So we're at 377, which is below that, which is good. But if we wanted to go down to 2030 target, that's 85 cents. So we could improve, make some improvements. Let's just change it back to energy use intensity, and you can see it's 127. So it gives you a good lot of information here. There's window to wall ratios. If you click on that, it'll give you graphs. You can adjust these sliders to choose another, maybe a lower value, and you can see the values will change. You can go down to maybe the HVAC. I think we looked at that earlier. Let's just go to the graph. And this is a good one because you have a curve that's it's pretty steep. When you make adjustments to this, you'll see a big difference in the changes here. When you have a curve, like for maybe a north-facing facade, it'll be fairly flat, and you can make adjustments here. You won't really see any difference here in the value changing. So we can adjust this, and we can see the value changing here. So that's our insight for that building. So what we could do then is go back to Revit. Let's go back to this mass. What we can do then is try to develop this mass into a detailed building. I don't really need the energy model. Let's see, can I do this? I'm going to add walls by face. Yeah. I'll go to 3D view. Sometimes it's a bit, I'm going to just go back a little bit. Okay. Oh yeah, we added a lot of stuff here, that's why. And just go back to the actual mass. I want to develop this into, I want to put on some roofs and some curtain walls. Okay. Okay. So it's easier if you go back to the actual mass itself. So we have a view of that. Then we can add, we have a curtain wall grid set up here, so we can choose these. Okay, mind that, that's just a panel. We can start to develop this building into a detailed building. We can add a roof. We can add roofs here, that's just a generic roof. We can start to add floors as well. So if you're adding floors, sometimes it's good to go to a wireframe view so you can see what you're doing. There's a floor. So, and add some spandrel panels. I'm not going to do with this because it's going to take a while. So you can see, you can develop the model up to a detailed model. We have another one here that we did. So let's go to that. And this is our detailed model. When you're finished all that, it'll end up like this. So we have spandrel panels, we have glazed panels, we have our roofs put in, we have floors put in as well. We have properties for the glazing, which is really important. So we click on a curtain panel. Click on a curtain panel. You can see it should have analytical properties. This is really important for FenestraPro because we read these values and we generate a lot of calculations from that. So we can open FenestraPro on this. Okay, so we can choose either spatial or building elements. There's two options for detail models. Okay, we'll just generate the solar loads again. Okay, and then I guess Simon again wants to show you the features of the detailed model.
Okay, so everything in our detailed model with regards to FenestraPro is the same user interface, same workflow, same user experience, as it were. The difference here is obviously, as Mike touched on, this curtain wall, this roof, these are families now. These are, proper Revit families with inherent properties within them. So earlier when we were setting thermal performances for different elements of our skin, they were theoretical values, really. What's happening here is FenestraPro is reading the value from this family, and the overall thermal performance of this glazing assembly, the thermal performance of this roof, etc., populating these figures into FenestraPro. So again, we can see if we're compliant with the particular codes that we've created earlier and prescriptive performances. Are our values that are in Revit compliant with those? Likewise, is our glass to wall ratio compliant? So again, really good comp checker in terms of early stage considerations, and are we going to be hitting code or otherwise? Likewise, our Facade Manager, very similar user interface. We can select different facades and different orientations, and as we select them, they drop into our Facade Manager. So these curtain walls are dropping in with all the inherent details, all the panels within them. We can select things in different ways, so we can select from a tree as such, facade 1, facade 2, facade 3, and within each of those facades we have all the different surfaces. Now, it's a pretty simple building, so you might, in a more complex building, you might have 160 facades or more or less or whatever that might be. So we've got to be able to filter and group them in different ways. So a couple of different things we can do. We can rename the facade. So we can go through, the key facades and call them, key streetscape 1, streetscape 2, or Simon's facade or Mike's facade or whatever that may be. And likewise, all the individual surfaces we can rename. We could also filter in different ways. So rather than select facade by facade, we could select by orientation and select everything to the north. We could filter down somewhat and select everything to the north that's greater than 50% glazed, or everything to the south that's to the ground floor or to first floor or whatever that may be, But also we can also in a very intuitive manner also create a new group. So I can create a group called Simon's Facades, and add facade 1, 2, and 3, and then every time I select that group, it will call up those particular facades. And as I said, things drop into my Facade Manager, which is based here. So you see all the different surfaces within that, and then within those surfaces, the inherent panels. the quantified areas, the performances, etc. Mike touched on there very briefly, we leverage the analytical properties. So if I double click within FenestraPro, I'm opening the type properties of this glazing. And we can see we've a really rubbish single glazed unit in that, in this tower. So let's choose something that's much, higher performing. Let's say, I don't know, quite randomly, we'll choose this double glazed unit. I don't know how good or bad or otherwise it is, but if I apply that, it updates the family, it updates FenestraPro, and in fact I should have had my charts open before that, because we'll see, first of all, FenestraPro will update what's in the actual navigator, but it will also update my charts and my dashboard accordingly. So really simple way of updating and getting a good understanding of our glass types or our early stage solutions. One of the other things we could do at any stage is export to Excel. So I didn't do this when we were looking at the mass, but I prepared one from earlier. We have a snapshot tool. So basically at any stage we can export a snapshot to Excel at the current state or design option or iteration of this particular project. So when I hit this, it will prompt me to create an Excel sheet and an option within that. Every time I hit this snapshot button thereafter, it will point to that particular Excel sheet and create a new iteration within it. So what effectively, let me just do it actually. What effectively I'll get is, let's see, option. What do I want to do here? Option B. Actually, let me just. So this is one I would have created earlier with just a single option. So it'll just give me a simple summary, first of all, with the client or the project data, the address, the areas, the quantified volumes or whatever that may be. And it will show me it will populate each snapshot that I've taken. It will also create a new tab within this sheet showing me, heat gains throughout the year across all the different surfaces, facade by facade, surface by surface, orientation information, daylighting information, and then this kind of very handy, useful chart showing the area of each facade or the areas glazing for each facade, the specification or the properties of that or the name of that family, the percentage frame, etc. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to try and do another one. So effectively what I'll get is, let me call this option B. I'll save this and I'll point towards the same Excel sheet, replace that, and then let me open it up again. So it should be here. So rather than, I must have created a new one, but then there's option B within it, So we've much more surfaces because it's a detailed model now. Again, much more detail, and as you can imagine, as you work through the process and try and, apply different types of glazing and create different snapshots or look at 20% glaze versus 30% glaze versus 40% glaze, you can very much see the differences between them, get a visual indicator, but also have the data to back that up, So that's some of the really outline functionality of FenestraPro, both in the conceptual mass and the conceptual mass coming from FormIt, but then also the Revit more detailed model, as we know Revit a little bit more, a Revit model that we know a little bit, on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, at this stage, we can generate another insight. And again, from a detail model point of view, we've something already prepared that we can discuss now.
Mm-hmm. So in our detail model, we can also generate insight. We can get results from this, and it's interesting. If you were sharp-eyed, you would have seen our results from the conceptual mass. Our heat gain was around 27. Our results from the detail model was also around 27. So when you go from the geometry of a conceptual mass, and then you develop that into a detail model, and then you can get more results from FenestraPro for this model, they're going to be fairly similar. That's also true for Insight. The results you'll get from Insight for mass and for the detail model, if the geometry is pretty much the same, is very similar. So that's good. It kind of shows you, you're on the right track. So here's our detail model. Here's the Insight results for this. Again, we can see the energy use intensity over here and our cost if we click on that. Again, it's below the ASHRAE target, so that's good. If we wanted to go down to the 2030 target, we could make some improvements, get down to 32. Gives you all this information. Again, you can take, that's not a good example because that's fairly flat curves. It's not, you can make adjustments here, but you're not going to see very much difference here in the value. So I'll just drag it back. But if you find a curve that's like this, it's fairly steep, when you make adjustments, you're going to see the values change. So let's go down to the HVAC again. We can drag this down to a different value, and you can see your results are going to change. So it can tell you, if you can get it down to this, you're going to see some improvements. So that's our insight for the detail model.
Okay, so I think that's kind of, hopefully that gave a good overview of, where are we? I'm going to go back to, hopefully you will jump back to the slides and you might be able to see it. But hopefully that gave a good overview in terms of the workflow and the differences between FenestraPro and Insight and, using FormIt and Revit. Just a recap on that kind of process that we did. We looked at a mass in FormIt, very much form finding exercise, and then brought that mass into Revit. And, with some simple energy settings, we were able to start engaging with FenestraPro to start making some early decision making on our envelope and on our facade design, whether that be the geometry of the glazing, whether shading devices are going to be utilized, or the type of glass or wall systems that we're going to use. Early stage EUI and energy costs through Insight then can be looked at, particularly around the active systems. And I suppose, again, that's one of the big differences between FenestraPro and Insight. While we can look at overall glass to wall ratio in Insight, we don't have the level of granularity that we can get into with FenestraPro in Revit. So, we're just making overall decisions, whereas in FenestraPro we can change the glass to wall ratio on a particular story or on a particular in a particular surface. So we have a gymnasium, we can have a different type of glass, or we can have more glass or less glass. So really good key differences between them. Using Revit, then we can start taking that mass and applying detailed elements to it. And start, populating with Revit families, whether you do that manually or, again, using FenestraPro, which we didn't really get to today. It's not part of what we were going to talk about, but we can very much drive that model based on, I want 30% glazing, but I want it in a particular window size, and FenestraPro will populate that. Or I want a curtain wall system of, 60% structural opening. FenestraPro can indicate that and populate your model with that. And maybe that's something that you guys could contact us if you want to see it a little bit more. And then using FenestraPro to really start looking at that more detailed model in a little bit more granularity. So we could see every single panel and every single window and every single solid panel on that entire building, and we can really start changing and looking at the implications. At any stage we can dive into Insight. At any stage we can dive into FenestraPro. So it's about sort of managing between them and what level of detail you want to get between either one. Anything I didn't cover, please please shout out any questions. I'm sure there might be some. That's kind of what we wanted to run through. Before we do take any questions, I'd like to thank Mike, first of all, who very ably assisted here today, and Amy in Applied Software, and you guys for attending. But apart from that, Amy, thanks a lot, and if there's been any questions, we're happy to kind of discuss.
Yes, thank you, Simon. I don't see any questions currently, but please type those questions into the Q&A widget now, if you have any. We'll leave that open for a moment. But as Simon mentioned, you can reach out to either Simon directly or to our team, and we will direct you to him if you have any questions that you think of later on.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's fine, Amy, and we're happy to do something, more one-to-one, or I'm sure your sales group will be reaching out to people over the next couple of days or week or two. As I did touch on, there's a lot of other bits and pieces with FenestraPro that we didn't really touch on today, that we're just trying to explore that kind of outline workflow, and hopefully it wasn't too high level. We just wanted to sort of skim through it on a very broad approach. But we're happy to set something up individually for your firms, in a more one-to-one basis. So please feel free to contact either us or Applied Software about that.
Yep, that would be great. And I still don't see any questions, so we can go ahead and close this webinar out. We do appreciate everyone for coming, and if you will complete the survey, you'll be entered to receive a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You must complete the survey to be entered. It'll only take a few seconds to complete. Thank you again for joining us today, and thank you again, Mike and Simon. We hope you found this webinar informative and helpful to your business. We look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thanks.